Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Inner Changemaker. So excited to be bringing you guys another interview. And you know that I always go out of my way to find some of the most interesting humans, and our guest is definitely one of those. I had the pleasure of meeting him in San Diego about half a year ago, and this guy, he has over 30 plus years of experience with live events and training. He's a speaker, he's an author. More importantly, he's considered by many the millionaire mastermind mentor and really an expert in joint ventures. And so that's what we're going to be geeking out on in this episode. Mr. Jay Fiset, welcome to the show, brother.
Hey, Jay, thank you so much for having me. I am thrilled and honored, and I really look forward to this conversation.
Yeah, I'm really glad that we finally made this happen, and, it's, life, I think, has a funny thing with timing. But, I wanted to ask you because, so much of you've been in the industry for quite a while. And, you've done a lot of things from speaking to tons of live training to joint ventures. And, instead of asking you the classical question of, tell us your story and have the entire episode be around that, I'd love to know from your perspective, when you first started in the online industry or even when you started as an entrepreneur, what was your relationship like with joint ventures and masterminds and live trainings? What was that category like, 20 plus years ago?
Oh, goodness gracious. That's a good question. So in a nutshell, I wandered into a personal development classroom as an 18-year-old, 19-year-old, thinking I was going to a sales training program. I was completely, I sometimes joke I had the consciousness of a potato, and found myself, it truly transformed my life. So about 2.5 years later, I was invited to take their facilitator training program. Okay. And think of it like the original Survivor. 20 of us applied, 10 of us were accepted, and every Friday for a month-long training, there were cuts and people were sent home. And then at the end of it, there was 4 of us left. And to say that it was intense would be an understatement. But that's really what got me into this intense transformational business. And it's close to 30 years. It was that was the summer of 1988. Just to put it in perspective, that was the summer of 1988. I did that training, and there are so many changes. And what's fascinating to me is that how do I even put this? There were so many changes. Is that everything there was relationships, heart to heart, face to face, belly to belly. That was the process. If someone came and did the course in the program, then really for us, the way that we built the business was, if this has made a difference for you in your life, do you know anyone in your friends, family, and world? And we ran that business, I would say 97% on referrals, really for the better part of about 15 years. I was an incredibly early adopter in terms of the internet. I mean, we were building websites in 1993. So I've produced television, infomercials, radio, all those pieces, just trying to get what we would call a new spark plug for a new referral tree so that we could tap into different areas and reach different communities and reach, all of those pieces. But I tell you, in the old days, the single most significant difference was if you wanted to get somebody enrolled in your program, there was one way to do it. You picked up the phone, you made an appointment, you had a coffee, you did a coaching session. Everything was incredibly hands-on and relationship oriented, which is in terms of all of my 3 brands, we are still incredibly relationship oriented. That's the thing we've done well and have held on to. But man, the tools today make it so much easier. Now it's getting a hell of a lot noisier. But that would be really the biggest distinction, which was, we really built our business. I renovated an old 1910 brick warehouse. That was our training facility, and we leased space out to a couple of people. And I had a nice loft on the second floor, so we lived and worked in the same space, and we put a coffee shop in it for the express purpose of we wanted to have a meeting place that was comfortable, that was relationship oriented, that was about people, and that coffee shop built our business, quite frankly.
Yeah, well, so smart. And, for context, I was going to interject there. I was born in 1989. I don't know if that's.
I'm feeling old.
Yeah, like. Well, it's funny. Like Jay, I had, as you know, like we're both fans of personal development, and I had Bob Proctor on here, and this was a little while ago, but we were joking. He was 81 at the time. I was 26 years old, and he was like, Jay, you're 3 times like I'm 3 times your age. In the episode. But wow, I mean, absolutely amazing, and I always enjoy these conversations because I remember we had. Jordan Harbinger, I'm sure you know Art of Charm, and he was talking about how they were podcasting before 2006, and he was using terminology and things. He was like, yeah, we would have to plug this into here, we have to drag this like back into our studio, and like I was like, I wouldn't be able to do any of that, so I guess I wouldn't have been podcasting back in, and that was 2006. So like to hear you talk about building these businesses in the 90s. And before the internet with all the automation and all those different things, I mean that's crazy. But I love what you said in around relationships. Yes. Around how that that still really hasn't changed. Like people want to feel that trust and feel heard, right? And that's amazing. So going like fast forwarding, 30 something years, now that you are doing these. I mean, live trainings and you're teaching people how to, have these masterminds. You're teaching them these joint ventures. I mean, how does that feel on your end, like your perspective of just seeing that evolution the last, 2 decades?
Well, that's a very, very interesting question because clearly you can tell folks that this isn't staged and pre-planned because I think the short answer to that question, Jay, is that we run 3 different brands, and I've spent most of my life in the personal development brand. And I'll tell you what I love about that is the depth of transformation. Like I love the depth of transformation. If we can put, 50 to 100 people in a room and really genuinely do the work in experiential trainings. This is not teaching people. This is the experiential training. This is about shifting from the inside out. There is no more valuable work in the universe. None. Full stop. And I have been unbelievably blessed. I think we've got about 40,000 graduates that have gone through our world in some way, shape, or form over the past 30 years. And I've been really blessed for that. But I got to tell you, and this is perhaps a personal skew to your question, Jay, but I got to tell you, the greatest challenge is that people don't value that. They don't value that.
What do you mean?
Well, I'll elucidate.
Yeah.
People's focus is still on the present problem. So that brand continues on, and we do beautiful work there. We have another brand called Mastermind to Millions, and that's a double entendre of we want millions of people to get the support of masterminds and the community that's necessary for them to fulfill their vision. And we want people who lead masterminds to be incredibly abundantly rewarded because I think some of the most important work in the world. Yeah. But that particular offering, we went from 0 to $2.4 million in 14 months. That's US, and you and I are both Canadian, so we both know that's $17.9 million Canadian.
It's true.
So that was an incredibly quick and powerful trajectory, literally from 0 for a brand that did not exist to doing that. And I'm very proud of that, very, very proud of that. But I got to tell you, there's a little part of me that resents is not exactly the right word, but there's a little part of me that shakes my head at people who are willing to invest unbelievable amounts of money in something that they think is going to make them money, something that they think is going to be the panacea for their business, something that they think. And by the way, I think Masterminds is simply one of the most powerful things in the universe. It carries forward some of our personal development stuff. It doesn't have the depth of that personal development stuff. So we, over here, we sell a tactic and a business structure and a training that is unbelievably valuable, and many people have used to add 6 and 7 figures to their business. Yeah. So that makes some sense to me. But you know what? The people who actually succeed at it are the ones that have their heart, mind, and soul aligned properly and have the beliefs to support it. Right? It's this work here that makes that truly and genuinely possible.
For sure.
but when I tried to sell that work over there, there's great resistance. It was like, oh yeah, I'm a coach. I teach that. Oh yeah, I'm all good at all the rest. It was like, yes, but you're still broken. You're still miserable and your relationships aren't working. Yeah. We should perhaps back up the bus. Just a thought.
Just a thought. Just a thought.
Yes. So anyway, I'm on a bit of a rant here about the world still doesn't truly value that type of work. So what we would sell, and I'll just put dollars and cents to it, what we would have challenges selling, just to be very clear about it, what we called the personal evolution package, which was a weekend, a 5-day program, and a 10-week support process with 3 weekends and 8 mini series in it.
Sure.
We had a difficulty selling that, Jay, for $3,000 Canadian. Now we still sold thousands and thousands, but good God, it was hard work. Now move over to the Mastermind to Millions thing. And we've sold, thousands of digital programs at $2,000 and hundreds of lead programs from $15,000 to $30,000, like that. So yeah. It's an interesting piece that, and what I really want to say about this is, for anyone listening, yes, invest in your business. Hell yes, hell yes, hell yes. Mm-hmm. But do it on the foundation of investing in your consciousness first. Mm. And this resistance to really kind of diving in and doing our own work and paying serious money for that is a fascinating thing to me.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's not the question that you asked.
No, I mean it's good, like, to have that perspective, right? Because I know, I wanted you to come on here to talk about Masterminds, but also a huge part of your success has been this idea of joint ventures, yes. of creating these partnerships. And I know that's part of the, one of your secret sauces, right, of being able to ramp up so much. But it's so good that we address this right in the beginning, because I know there's a lot of people that listen to the show that they feel that they have, they feel that they're called to do something, to yes. share a message, to launch a podcast, to have a YouTube channel, to change the world, right? But what you're saying is so right. It's kind of like, I think it was Tony Robbins who said it's like there's like the artistry of something, and then there's like the science of achievement, right? There's like the artistry of like life, and then the science of achievement. I might be getting those wrong, but it's the same thing with like a business. There's the artistry of like creating the message, right? Yep. And having something to say, having something to share, wanting to share your story. But then there's the science of the business. And those who neglect the business side of it, right? And they neglect some of those important elements that you mentioned, you can't have, you need both, Yes. And I love that you kind of put that together for us.
Yeah. So more to answer your question in terms of what I think you actually asked. Is that in the evolution is that there are so many more choices today in the personal transformation field. There are so many more ways to experience support. And it's become normalized to have a coach. It's become normalized to be in a mastermind group. It's become normalized to go and engage in some process of personal evolution. And, honest to goodness, 30 years ago, I'd tell people what I did, and they'd kind of pull me aside and it's like, so you went and you did like those courses and stuff? And it's like, yeah, meaningless. Like, wow, you look pretty normal. Like, what's wrong with you? And it's like, seriously. It's like at that time, 30 years ago, it was, if you're doing this kind of work, there's obviously something wrong with you that you need that help. Right. And I think the most fantastic evolution that I have witnessed in the last 30 years is that we as human beings are far more open and willing to say, I don't have all the answers. I am going to engage support. I'm going to accelerate my evolution by hiring somebody who's been there, done that. I don't need to reinvent the damn wheel. It's already, I just need to roll one. So that is perhaps the single greatest piece. And I would just add to that, in the personal development realms and those pieces, that when they are in the room, there's significantly less resistance to doing the work. And in the old days, it was like there was just always this big resistance, like, let's just do the work. Let's just do the work, and then it's fine. So that's the cool part in that world. And I still, and this is the part I was alluding to earlier. And in the business world, and this is still Masterminds and Joint Ventures, are two other brands that evolved out of this. There is still a bit of resistance to, I think, what people perceive as going back to do their personal work. And I just want to declare to everyone here, exactly as Jay said, it is a both and. You cannot do it either or, and it is an ongoing and never-ending process. Yes. It is, you don't arrive, it isn't done. It is a part of the journey of evolving as an entrepreneur and making your contribution to planet Earth. So anyway, that to me is this. We're still at this spot, and I actually think it's coming. We're at a tipping point where people in the entrepreneurial world are asking the more significant questions of, if the tactics aren't working, what do I need to do? Who do I need to be, and what do I need to do, as opposed to let's just get another tactic. That was a long answer, but I hope that frames it decently.
It's good, and I think it perfectly transitions to kind of where I wanted to, almost selfishly wanted to geek out on, but I know it's going to bring a lot of value to a lot of the listeners and people that are watching this. And you mentioned not just another tactic, right? Mm-hmm. And I think there's always these overriding principles in business. Masterminds, joint ventures, all these things existed when there was no internet. And guess what? People made tons of money, right? And now with the internet, people are making tons and tons of money as well. And they're still having, it's different, but they're still having the impact that they ultimately want. So, Jay, having you on here, like maybe we should have done this in the beginning, but I think just make sure we're all on the same page. What is joint ventures? And how would you say it's impacted a couple of the brands and businesses that you've obviously grown?
I love that. So here, and I'll use my definition of joint ventures, which may not be the definition of joint ventures, but to me, joint ventures is working very selectively with a group of people that I would include the definition of friends. Okay, so this isn't just a transaction for me, but I would include the definition of friends, where we truly and genuinely understand what the big game of somebody's mission and business is, and we make agreements to serve and support one another on that mission with one eye. The eye is not money. The eye is not list building. The eye is not, with the one eye, which is this, for the contribution and the acceleration of value to our clients. And when that is put first, the other money and the other stuff, all that stuff automatically occurs. Yeah. But when that isn't put first, it becomes a downward spiral and a royal pain in the ass. There's not another way to put that. I should probably.
Would you say it's like one of the big misconceptions on joint ventures?
I think it is a huge misconception, yes. And I think that it's driven by people's flawed business models that are looking for, I was on a summit a little while ago with the passive income something or other. Sure. Is that people are always chasing this mysterious recurring passive income where I can be on the beach and money just magically follows. And it's like, let's be clear about this, that happens, but it's sometimes a little bit like a Bigfoot or a unicorn sighting. Maybe it happened. We just haven't seen it that often. Right. So I'm being a smartass, obviously. But this agenda of getting something for nothing relegates the value of our clients to a second, third, or fourth place, which builds in the fatal flaw where it cannot work for long. Now, one of the things that's interesting to me is like I have people say to me, "Oh, I've been at this really long time, been at it like 6 years." It's like, "Oh, good for you. That's a long time." Yeah. But it's a different thing to be at it for 30 years and to have clients with you for 25 of them, which I have a bunch of. That doesn't happen by putting in clients' value and their desires second, third, or fourth. Mm. So one of the key pieces to this is that for me, friendship, aligned business values, and only entering into something if it's going to move my clients' visions, goals, and accomplishments forward. If it does, I'm all in. And it takes, and this is one of the key pieces that goes back to this idea, is that it takes an abundance mindset. This is one of the reasons why joint ventures, for the most part, often don't work, because the consciousness of abundance, there's more than enough for all of us, actually sneaks in the way. It's like, well, wait a second, that was my client. And if I'm going to share my client, I need to know what you're going to do with them. And then I need a trailing override for the next 27 years, which frankly is crap, because here's a truism about all of our businesses, is that our clients go deaf and blind to us. If you think about your client journey, so the client journey of what you have to offer to them having absolutely everything that you have to offer, generally speaking, somewhere, and I've been straw polling this, but somewhere between 12 and 17% of actually integration of what you could serve and support a client with, your clients think, oh yeah, I've got what Jay needs. I know I got his mastermind manual, and I ran a WCC, which is a wine conversation cash. I got everything he's got to learn. And the truth of the matter is that they've got about 10% of it, but then by design, they're looking for their next thing that they believe they need. And anything that I say gets filtered through is like, yeah, I know what Jay does. He's that mastermind guy. It's all good.
Yeah.
And that filter. So here's the thing from my perspective is that if we already know they're going to go deaf and blind to us, that we can't provide all of what we could to them because of their own filters, then why don't we become the trusted advisor that says, hey, look, what do you think you need next? Because if what you think you need next is to develop a podcast, well, I can introduce you to my friend Jay, who does one of the greatest podcasts under the sun, and he actually has a service and support to actually do that. Because what I know is, and just to be clear about this, there's another 80% here. If you're willing to come back and pay attention to it, I will serve you. But if you think the podcast is the thing, I'll introduce you to Jay, and he'll take great care of you because we have a relationship and we have shared values that serve and support the client.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I love that because you're really talking about being on the same page, but not just in terms of like, how do we make more money, but really the first and foremost is how do we serve them and give them a world-class experience, right? Yes. What are the tools that they need so that this becomes a, not just a choose your own adventure, here, buy the course and we'll see you later. And you kind of choose and pick, but there's an actual framework and system and it actually serves the people that actually, raises their hand and say, hey, I want that, or I want to be able to create that. So I think that's you articulated that very beautifully.
Yeah, and I guess the only thing to add to that I think is really significant and important is that the clients have a vision that may or may not be their highest and best, but they also have a journey that they've got to go through. So instead of the key thought and shift that, I have an event called JayWongTV Live, which is like the foundational learning pieces of putting joint ventures together, and then a more advanced thing called the JayWongTV Summit, which is invite only. But at JayWongTV Live, one of the key things that we teach and help them frame around is this idea of abundance and service to the client. And as soon as we truly shift and hold that idea, there are more joint venture opportunities than you could possibly take advantage of in your entire life in the stand of service to your clients. And then it becomes just like, what's the best match? What's the best timing? How do we do this? What's the all the rest of it. So that shift is really what we teach, along with the structure, the steps, the art of the invitation. Like some people call it, it's a JV pitch. We don't do JV pitches. There's a joint venture invitation that we could explore and see how that might work. But that's a very different thing, because to me, if you're pitching it, that means your motive isn't the client. The motive is
to
money.
Make money, yeah.
Yes, exactly. So that's not our prime motive. It is a beautiful ancillary benefit of doing it well.
Yeah. Well, Jay, just I'm curious myself, because I've only done a couple different type, and I didn't really even call them necessarily joint ventures, but in all the traditional senses, it was a joint venture or a partnership, however you want to classify it, a 50-50 split. Someone's launching a course. It fits within both of our tribe and our community's mission, and it's a complementary thing that I can add, and I would love to endorse, that person for. And so, I'm curious, from people attending, JayWongTV events and you working with them the last couple decades, what has been maybe some of the results, like, because there's so many people that are listening to this, they go, you know what, I kind of want to do joint ventures, and, this word keeps coming up for me. What has been maybe, I don't know if you know any stories off the top of your head.
A multitude, absolutely, a multitude. But I'll share one that's very recent. So there's a gentleman named Dave Dubois. He's in our program called Joint Venture Mastery, and he'd been doing webinars and had been doing joint ventures in real estate for a bunch of years. And when I say joint ventures in real estate, he does real estate training as well, but he's also done joint ventures in terms of the purchasing of real estate, capital pools, all those sort of things. So he's sophisticated, he's smart, and he's been at it for a long while, and he's substantial net worth, all those sorts of things. And he really wasn't sure that the joint venture mastery thing was going to be right for him, because I'm kind of sort of already doing all this stuff. So we talked, and I could tell right away that and this happens all the time, Jay, I'm sure you see it all the time, is that the big rocks are in place in terms of what he was doing.
Mm-hmm.
But the nuances of the connections and the interrelationship of the pieces in terms of his business model were less than elegant, let's say.
That was an elegant way of saying it.
If we were drinking wine, I'd say it in a different way.
Sure.
With try.
That's for the private session after this, folks.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So anyway, we just start working on one fundamental piece, which is we need to refine a webinar with enough data, with enough people, with enough systemic changes, meaning that we're not changing 9 things at once, we're changing 1 or 2 things at once, so we can begin to evaluate what transpired. So he went from having random webinars, and sometimes I made $10,000, sometimes I made nothing. I had a peak of $15,000, but then I had 2 with nothing.
Right.
In November, it was November 7th it wasn't even a full month, into December, he did 5 partner webinars and sold $92,000 of his program.
Whew. That's
so
awesome.
Well, exactly, and it was, and so I of course, and I have a great little testimonial of his, and there's if people want to search on Facebook, they can look up JayWongTV, that's in there, and he was just writing is that the key to it was, number 1, utilizing our model, which we call webinars that convert, and staying consistent and getting enough data, getting the 200 to 300 people through the webinar so he had real data of what was working, what was not working, and then just ramping the thing up.
Yeah. So
$100,000 fundamentally in a month, that didn't exist. That was completely hit and miss prior to that. That is the foundation of that training. Here, I'll just give you one other one. A brilliant woman named Sherry Strong. She runs a program called Sweet Freedom, where she helps people break their sugar addictions. Now, she is one of the most brilliant people on planet Earth for this, and has this fantastic program that they were just having a terrible time selling. And literally, all we did was we worked on a special offer related to Christmas with a little bonus bundling piece in terms of the strategy, and had her test the traffic, and her conversions are almost 20% off the webinar. Now, that's a substantial conversion rate.
Yeah, that's crazy.
So those are, how do I put this? People listening are probably in one of 2 spots, in my humble experience, is that they are in the spot of, what the heck is that, and how would I do that? And in which case, honest to goodness, you should come hang out at one of our events, JayWongTV Live. Like, you'll get that whole picture. You'll learn the art of the invitation. You'll deal with people who are doing it. You'll actually, if you're ready, you'll leave with agreements in place. People always leave with agreements in place. Or you have the blocks in place, but it's not either generating the results you want, or it's not consistently generating the results that you want. And in that case, there are some finesse and interconnected pieces that's missing, because there are an inordinate number of moving pieces in a great JV. And the foundation of a great relationship is the first, because then we can, the ups and the downs and the ins and the outs. But there's a whole process that is there that is 1,000% necessary. We've got to make it easy for them. We've got to give them swipe copy. There's got to be a transparent process of if you send a link for me, then I can tell on my end if it's open. You can tell on your end if it's got sales. Like, we can completely trust each other because everything is transparent, and you need those transparent systems for this to work. You'd ask one of the differences between the old days and today. In the old days, it was like, great, I'll refer some people to you in my classroom, and if they show up in your classroom, you'll pay me. Well, sometimes that happened, sometimes that didn't. There was no way to track it. There was no system. Sure. It was just a handshake. But with today's technology, it's easy, it's transparent, it just, when technology works, it's the most beautiful thing in the world, and when it doesn't, it's a pain in the ass. Yeah. We all know. But when it works, there is nothing easier in the universe than serving my clients, delivering something, or connecting them to something that I couldn't do or couldn't do as well, and still generating revenue. Like, it's how much better does that get?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this is. I mean, I said this at some point that I was selfishly asking Jay to come on because I'm at that stage of my business, for full transparency, where I'm doing some of those exact things where we have some consistent results and we have certain things that are maybe not so consistent, but in building in the idea of how do we serve the community to the fullest extent, right? That's part of having you come on to talk about some of these things, because I don't necessarily have the expertise, to talk about joint ventures and webinars and masterminds, but you do because of your decades of experience, right? So I love that you shared that and the results. Let me ask you this, because there's a lot of people that are listening to this, and already this is not necessarily a normal episode where there's something necessarily for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
People that are getting the most value out of this, they are kind of, they have a few pieces going. They've been in business for X amount of time, right?
Yeah.
For you, I know there's so many moving pieces, but is there something that you see a lot of times that people just kind of get wrong all the time, like in their business? Like it just seems like, is it because there's like a million moving parts with an email sequence, right? There's a million moving parts of a webinar, right? But is there, outside of the mindset, tactically speaking, is there, or is every case kind of a little different, kind of based off their experience and obviously the niche market that they're in?
Well, first of all, I love that question. Now this episode is going 7 hours.
Yeah.
So I've sort of already alluded to it, but I'm going to give a very specific example of a woman who was referred to me a couple of days ago, and she said, "Look, I'm ready. I am joint venture ready. I've got my Infusionsoft set up. I've got my freebie opt-in. I've got my website done. My program is already finished. I just need to sell it." So that's a great example of the big rocks are in place.
Yes.
And what she did, and I don't want to go too much into what she did. I'll just describe the piece. Is that all of those elements were there, and fundamentally, all of it was wrong. All of it was wrong. And just to back up the bus from the very beginning, is her program is done already. Never, ever, 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 ever build the program before you sell it.
Yep.
You sell it, you run a beta program, you develop the content, you prove the concept, you refine the promise, you get testimonials, you do all of those pieces, and you do it with 15 or 30 people, and you prove that it works. To go and spend 6 months building a program nobody has ever bought is the dumbest thing in the universe. And I'm not trying to be a jerk, but it's like, people, stop that. It's wrong, it's expensive, it keeps you broke, and it doesn't include the most important people in the process, your clients. So that's just one aspect of it. Then the next piece was, I've got a freebie. I've got a great freebie for lead generation. Great, show me the opt-in page. And she sends me to her website. And her website has 73,000 different clicks, links, and all the rest of it. And in the bottom right-hand corner, that's where people opt in for their freebie. It's like, that will never work. It's like, well, a couple of people have. I said, well, we don't need a couple of people. We need 5,000 to 10,000. So when you have an opt-in, it doesn't go on your website. It goes on its own specific landing page with great copy and great reasoning for the freebie itself. You have to sell the freebie independently. Yeah. So those are just two key pieces of not understanding what goes on. And then here's the next one that I just... See, I could go on forever.
So Jay, let me interject really quick. Transparency. In my first year, in my first 6 months, I made both those mistakes coming out of the gates, right? Another one that I always mention to my students, my podcasting students, is I had a podcast. I launched it, and I didn't know why I needed an email list, and I didn't want to bother launching an email list with a podcast. That seems a little too complicated. I'm just going to launch the podcast, throw out content. They will love it so much, Jay, that they will email me. I'm sure it'll happen.
Of course they will. Of course they will.
So it's good because we're talking about some of the cardinal sins of online course creation, of mindsets of approaching some of these joint ventures. And also some of these cardinal sins of getting started, right?
Well, and let's just talk about that for a brief second. Number one, if you are not building a list, you don't have a business. And we just need to tell the truth about that. And by the way, when I say building a list, I'm not necessarily saying it has to be an email list. We all know the email open rates are falling. But you know what? What about your Facebook Messenger list? What about your Facebook group list? What about your There's 10,000 ways to build a list. But the honest to God truth is, if you're not focusing on that, you don't have a business. That's that. But this other piece, I think, and this goes back to consciousness. I think the reason that people want to go and invent their course on their own and then come out of the basement and go, ta-da, look what I created and the world will be the path to my door, is that they don't have the confidence to be in process. They don't have the confidence to be in process with their clients. They want to be in a position where it's like, oh, they're ahead and they're not going to be challenged and all the rest of it. But I want to just share this story. When I said we went from 0 to 2.4 in 14 months, I'll tell you exactly what transpired. I had a person wanted me to do one of these giveaways in terms of building an email list. I was really working on building my email list, which was a little teeny tiny at the time. And I gave away my Mastermind Mentors Manual, the exact tool that I use to train my coaches, my facilitators, and my team to deliver masterminds in my personal development business. So that's how this mastermind thing happened, is that we rolled out masterminds to support people after the courses to live into the transformation. And I trained my team to deliver masterminds for like 2 decades before I ever did it outside. So I give this little manual away, and I'm hoping to get like 300 opt-ins. I got 3,500 opt-ins in like 7 days. And then it was like, holy shit, people are interested in this. Yeah. I should sell them something. So
seems like a great next idea. Yeah.
Yeah. So all we did was I created a webinar that said, hey, the mistakes that people make using this mentor's manual, and I sent it to everybody who opted in. In the webinar, I told them that there are 6 pillars. These are the 6 pillars I've been training since the beginning of time. I've only ever done it internally. Yeah. I'm going to do it for the first time externally, and you guys can participate in, while I'm delivering it, the creation of a program that's going to be aimed at the rest of the world. And instead of the regular $2,000, I'm going to charge you $997. I did 2 of those webinars with a total, please hear this, with a total of 100 people on the line. And I sold 60 of them.
What?
And then, yes, and then I delivered that program, recorded it all, did everything from scratch. Everyone there knew I had never done it like this before. I had to go back and edit videos and where I say, well, this is how I would do it here. This is what I did there, all the rest of it, so that all was clean. And that became the program that we have now since sold hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of at $19.97. But tell them the freaking truth of where you're at with it. And by the way, there's a bunch of stuff that I just deleted based on their feedback. There's a bunch of stuff I added based on their feedback, and it now meets the client's needs. So just be in process and be truthful about it, because we are all figuring our shit out. Yeah. All of us. Always.
Well, I love that. I love that you shared that, because that's, truth being told, that's exactly how I built Podcast Your Brand, my online accelerator to teach people that want to launch podcasts. The exact method. My numbers were not as high, and I did not do as many webinars, but it's the exact same principles. And I love that we talked about some of the more advanced things like JV and Masterminds, but also some of these things that I think a lot of people they want to they want to have that confidence, they want to have that abundance, and by wanting to do it, it's almost like they're making those mistakes by not actually stepping into that, right? Mm-hmm. And so I love that you mentioned those things. You mentioned a couple of your events. I know you do this all the time, and that was one of the reasons we had a chance to meet when I was in California. What are some of the upcoming events you have coming up? Where can people kind of socially stalk you a little more, Jay? Because obviously it's a more in-depth, this was like, probably 1% of the entire actual conversation that one could have around joint ventures and masterminds and live events and people, for people that want to monetize their expertise and their message, where can they go to do that?
Perfect. Well, how do we? Can we just give them a couple of freebies, or should they just come find me online, or what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, I mean, if I know you do tons of events, I mean, obviously seeing you in action is really great. If you have
and I'm a big believer in that.
Yeah.
So the short version is this: is that you can find me on Facebook. Just type in Jay Fiset on Facebook. It is also, I have a blog, which is jayfiset.com. You're welcome to get there. There's all kinds of complimentary resources and those sorts of things. If you're on Facebook, there is a Mastermind to Millions community, which is a public free group with an inordinate amount of resources in there. And there's also a JVology, the perfect mix of people, fun, and profit Facebook group, which is, again, a ton of resources just aimed at serving and supporting people to learn the basics of those things. But if anyone's really interested in mastering this whole JV world, they could go to JVology, so that's JVOLOGY live.com. There's an upcoming event in Orlando, February 15th to 17th, a group of amazing people. I lead that primarily. Some of my key joint venture partners come and teach and train on key things like webinars and designing courses and everything that we just talked about. So it is, and I say this with all Canadian humility, it is the best training for joint ventures that exists on planet Earth, because you are engaged and you're doing deals there. You get to invite and practice your invitations. You get to leave with webinar bookings, podcast bookings, email swap list bookings. We just spell it out, and people go, "Oh, it could be that easy." Yes, it could be that easy. Let's do that. And magic happens there, and it just simply rocks.
That is awesome, and I'm going to link to everything below the video, and I'm going to link to everything in the show notes. But Jay, really, really pumped to have had you on. One last question before we hop off the line. The name of the show, Inner Changemaker. I know you're a big guy in personal development. When you think of Changemaker, what pictures, what words come to mind for you?
Well, it's interesting you say that. Is that I see something from the inside out, and that it is about me changing me. It is about me leveraging my strengths. It is about me coping, releasing, dealing with what my limitations and fears are, so that I can go out and live my mission in the world. And it is a very internal piece, and I fervently believe that it is always the private battles that precede the public victories. And if we don't do that piece, the public victories never occur.
Well said, my man. Well, Jay, absolute pleasure in having you on. For you, the listener, the viewer, if you guys got any value out of today, and we covered a lot of ground. I mean, we talked about the cardinal sins of really online marketing, right? And we talked about live trainings, we talked about joint ventures. And if you guys want to explore further, heavily recommend checking out some of those resources that we're going to link down below. And I can't wait to see you guys in the next interview. So really appreciate everyone's time, and we'll talk to you guys next time.
Thanks for having me.